Hey, thank you so much for joining us today, and I am just so pleased that we get to spend this time together today in part 2 of this short series called Leaning In. And let me begin with a reference to a movie that came out a handful of years ago. The movie was called The 100-Foot Journey, and its setting was in southern France. And so most of the drama took place on a single street between two dwellings that were across from each other. And so the 100-Foot Journey, southern France, on this side, there is a French restaurant. A French restaurant that is a Michelin star restaurant serving time-tested, traditional French cuisine. Now, right across the street from this French restaurant was an abandoned building that it was purchased by a family that immigrated from India. And they decided to open an Indian restaurant. And so they play this loud Bollywood type music. They've got this neon sign and fragrances and flavors that are, let's just say, very French. And so you've got the woman that runs the French traditional restaurant and the Indian family across the street. Listen, only a street separates them. It's a journey of 100 feet. It's a 100-foot journey, but crossing that street takes you to a completely different world. And I thought about this movie this week, The 100-Foot Journey, and leaving your world and entering somebody else's world. When we open the book of Acts and we see the transition that is underway with the growing Jesus community. The book of Acts describes for us how the Jesus movement began to grow right after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And so just to orient us spatially, let's travel to Jerusalem. Jerusalem here, this is where Jesus is executed. It's where he dies on the cross for us. It's where the resurrection takes place, and it's where the Jesus community begins. But the book of Acts covers about 35 years, and by the time you get to the end of the book of Acts, you see that the Jesus community has expanded throughout the Mediterranean world, places like Thessalonica, Corinth, Rome, Ephesus. But it's not simply that the Jesus community expanded geographically. It did expand in geography, but there's another shift taking place. The Jesus community is transitioning ethnically and socially. Because when it was bottled up here in Jerusalem, everyone who belonged to it, they were basically all either Jewish or converts to Judaism. And when it expands throughout the Roman world over the next 35 years, it is now Jewish and non-Jewish people, Jews and Gentiles gathered together in the same spiritual community. Now, this is the deal. When the Jesus community started with Jewish people in Jerusalem, they didn't see this coming. See, God would have to expand their hearts. And not just the heart of the Jesus community in Jerusalem, but the heart of its leaders. Today's focus is on the expansion, the heart expansion of one of Jesus' disciples who was a leader in the Jerusalem church. His name is Peter, and today we're going to watch him over a period of 4 days, and we're going to see his heart expand. Now, as we have this conversation today, it's very possible that you are in the process of having your heart expanded, and your heart can expand in any number of ways. It's a possibility that God might be right now expanding your heart for your neighbors. It's possible also that God might be expanding and enlarging your heart for people with whom you work, whether it's an office or whether it's a job site. And rather than just coworkers or customers or clients, it could be that this is a season in your life where you're actually dialing in to the personal needs or the spiritual needs of those that you work with. God's expanding your heart for people at work. It could be that in this season of racial unrest that God is expanding your heart to having better conversations about racial healing. It's possible that God is expanding your heart in relationship to your extended family, your nieces, your nephews, cousins, that brother-in-law. See, There are many tragedies in life, but one of the tragedies is having a small heart that remains small. As we dive into this story together and we see Peter's heart expand, I hope that this provides some coaching and maybe just some encouragement, perhaps just some affirmation regarding the work that God is already up to in your life and the movement that you're already experiencing with God expanding your heart. So our outline today, we're going to watch Peter over the course of 4 days, or watch the story over 4 days. And as these 4 days unfold, I believe we're going to learn some valuable insights, lessons along the way about what happens when God expands our heart. So let's begin with day number 1. And day number 1, we're just calling the soldier. Day number 1, the soldier. And crazy, if you take a look at a map here, the story does not begin down here in Jerusalem. It begins up here in Caesarea. Caesarea is a Roman city. In fact, just there in the name, Caesarea, it was named after Caesar in Rome. Now, if you are a Jew in the first century, if you're a Jew during the time of Jesus and you live in Palestine, your spiritual capital is Jerusalem, but the Roman capital up there is Caesarea. That's where our story begins. You know, in an artist's rendition of the city of Caesarea, there's a palace for the Roman governor. There's a Roman theater where you'd watch Greek and Roman plays. There's a hippodrome where there would be Roman sports. There's even a temple over here to the emperor, temple to the emperor. I can't think of a more un-Jewish place in Israel than Caesarea, and this is where our story begins with a soldier. The guy's name is Cornelius. He's a career soldier. He is an officer in the Roman army. And yet, crazy thing, we read this description of Cornelius. Are you ready for this? Check this out. It says he and his family were devout, interesting, and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need, and he prayed to God regularly. While not being a Jew, while being a Gentile, a non-Jew, he's doing some of those practices that a righteous, holy, godly Jewish person would do. It says that he prayed to God regularly. I think it's telling us there that rather than the idol background of the Roman system, I think he's dialing in to the God of the Jews, the one creator God of the universe. It's also touching his wallet. It says he gave to those in need. He gave generously to those in need. He's praying regularly. Now, something really, really weird happens. Cornelius, up in Caesarea, it says that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he has his vision. It's like this hyper dream, this dream on steroids. Now, this does not happen on every page of our Bible. But in this vision, there's like an angel of God that appears to him. And the angel says, Cornelius, God has seen your gifts and God has heard your prayers. And now we have some instructions. And the instructions that Cornelius receives are these. It says, now send men to Joppa and bring back a man named Simon who is called Peter. Now Cornelius up here in Caesarea sends some servants 30 miles to the south. See, it's a 30-mile journey for Cornelius or for his servants. Get this guy by the name of Peter, who was one of Jesus' early disciples, and ask him to come to your house. I just want you to notice something very early in the story. Very early in the story, it appears to me, and let me just word it this way, that God is at work. That God is at work. Just observe something with me. It's not Cornelius' idea to go get Peter. It's not Cornelius' idea to travel up to visit. It's not Peter's idea to travel up to visit Cornelius. It seems like God is orchestrating behind the scenes. God is the envisioner. God is orchestrating. God is moving. Or to put it simply, God is at work in this story. God is powerfully at work in this story for these two guys to meet. I think this is so important for us and so powerful for us simply to remember that when God is at work in expanding your heart, just believe that God may be powerfully at work. God may be powerfully at work in your office. God may already be at work in your extended family in ways that you don't even see or detect. God may be at work in your neighborhood in ways that are unseen to you. But just trust this, rarely are we taking the first step. Often we are responding to the movement of a God who is already at work. Let me put it this way. When God expands our heart, so often we are stepping into a stream that is already in motion. See, God is about something powerful and deep and broad in this story. Cornelius sends someone down to get Peter, but know something. God is the orchestrator and mover here. God is already at work. Before we move on to day 2, just a little cultural detail that it might be good for you to know. Jewish people who were devout Jews did not enter Gentile homes. Jewish people and non-Jewish people didn't hang out together. I want to show you a picture here. It's an image of the trial of Jesus with Pontius Pilate. Historical accuracy in this painting is that Jesus' trial was outside. Do you know why Jesus' trial was outside? That is, that those who were gathered to accuse him were outside in an open plaza. John chapter 18 tells us this. It says, to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace of Pontius Pilate. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charge are you bringing against this man?" Just note that. Pardon us, Mr. Governor, but if we enter your palace, we will be spiritually, what word is there, unclean? To avoid ceremonial uncleanness. We will be ceremonially unclean. We will be contaminated by your moral filth. Therefore, if it's not too much to ask, would you please come on outside and conduct the trial out here? Good, devout Jewish people did not enter non-Jewish homes. So here's Cornelius. He sends messengers, 3 messengers down to get Peter to haul him back to Caesarea. The big question is, look, Cornelius might be ready to receive Peter. Is Peter ready to travel to the home of a Roman soldier? The messengers arrive the next day. This takes us to day 2. Day 2, lunch. Peter doesn't know they're coming. He's up on a flat rooftop. It's lunchtime, it's around noon. He's hungry. He's also there to pray. So he's praying and also sends away for some lunch. And it's time in our story for vision number 2. Cornelius is ready, but the Spirit of God has to work in Peter so that he's ready for this meeting, this interaction. And as he's hungry and as he's praying, it says that he fell into a trance. And now Peter has a vision on day 2. And it's strange to us, but this is what it was strange to him as well. It's like this sheet came down from the sky, and it was filled with all kinds of animals, all kinds of birds, and all kinds of reptiles. Now, if you're familiar with the dietary restrictions of the Jewish people, particularly back in the world of the Bible, animals were classified into okay, you can eat these, you can't eat these, but it was called, these are the clean animals, these are the unclean animals. So just some of the options here were the following. Lambs, lamb kebabs, you can eat lamb, okay, no pork, clean and unclean. Next one, cow and donkey on the clean list. Good, I'm not interested in donkey steaks. Anyway, on the unclean list. And this next one, chicken, that's on the clean list. A vulture on the unclean list. But every single animal group was divided into this clean and unclean. And in his vision, the sheet comes down. It's filled with all these animals. All these animals. And then he hears a voice, and the voice says this. Then a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat. Go at it, cook some food." And you can just imagine Peter saying, oh, this is wonderful. I'll start with the pork tacos. And after the pork tacos, oh, I'd love a donkey burger. And then I'll finish off my meal with some buzzard kebabs, you know? No, he's like, no, I can't do that. I've never eaten anything on the unclean list. Check out what he says here. He just says, surely not, Lord, Peter replied. I have never eaten anything impure or unclean. From childhood, I've never devoured food on the unclean list. And then the voice again says, do not call anything impure that God has made clean. Peter, I'm going to expand your heart. Do not call things unclean that God is in the process of making clean. Messengers are about to arrive at Peter's door, and he doesn't even know it. And God is in the process of expanding his heart. Now, this vision occurs 3 times. It happens, then it happens again, and then it happens again. And then he wakes up and he's ready to eat. He goes, what in the world was that all about? And it says, the Spirit of God said to him, Peter, some men are at your door right now. I have sent them, and you need to go with them. See, this dream about clean and unclean wasn't just about clean and unclean animals and clean and unclean food. This vision to expand Peter's heart is a vision about who are clean and unclean people. And here is the directive, Peter, you need to go with them. Now, when Peter woke up that morning, I don't think he saw this coming. So kind of word number 2 or insight number 2 when God expands your heart is just kind of prepare for the unexpected. Hey, expect the unexpected. Don't be surprised if you are surprised. Here we go. Prepare to be unprepared. Expect the unexpected. This is so important for us who are planners. And we like to have everything mapped out in advance. And my friends, there might be time when God chooses to hijack your heart and to take you in an unexpected direction. Remember this, if God begins to expand your heart to serve kids with special needs, expect the unexpected. If you find yourself moved, drawn toward mentoring younger adults who, let's just say, need some guidance, expect the unexpected. I've just learned this in my own personal journey that often when God begins to expand your heart, you don't know step 2, step 3, step 4. There's just a lot of unexpected along the way. Don't be surprised if you are surprised. A couple months back, I talked about a dinner that I was invited to, I guess now almost 5 years ago. Initial conversation took place with a guy by the name of Mark, and it was down the street from my house, this place called Cascade Roadhouse. It was in the afternoon, place was empty. And Mark had an agenda. He said, Jeff, there are some African American, some black leaders, influential leaders in Grand Rapids that you need to meet and they need to meet you. And he invited me to dinner. This sent me on the voyage, the journey of the unexpected, as God continued to expand my heart. I did not expect that saying yes to that dinner would lead to dinner after dinner after dinner after dinner after dinner after dinner for the last 4.5 going on 5 years. I did not expect that conversations about race would be so incredibly complicated. I did not expect that we would end up forming a brotherhood and find so much enjoyment in each other's company. And in late May, early June, when things were kind of blowing up here in Grand Rapids, the night of rioting downtown and broken glass and broken buildings, I didn't expect that one of those leaders would find himself on my patio for 4 hours one confusing night as he attempted to lead in our city. Literally 4 hours, 7 o'clock in the evening till 11 o'clock at night around my fire pit. I don't remember any problem that we solved. It was just hanging out as brothers in a very complicated week. See, when I accepted that first appointment at Cascade Roadhouse, will you come to a dinner? It has led to a ton of when I accepted that first commitment to Cascade Roadhouse, there was a ton that I didn't expect. Expect the unexpected. Don't be surprised when you are surprised. If I think I have to have every single step laid out, I might miss how God might be pleased to expand my heart. When Peter wakes up that morning, I don't think he has any clue that the next day he's going to be heading north to Caesarea. Brings us to day 3. Day 3, the journey. And just in one verse or in a verse fragment, we find these words. The next day, Peter started out with them, and some of the believers from Joppa went along. He is heading 30 miles from Joppa up to Caesarea. Notice that last statement, that's important. Some of the, what does it say? Some of the believers from Joppa. As Peter heads north, he's got a posse. You got Peter, you've got 6 friends, we'll learn later in the story. These are Jewish Jesus followers, Jewish believers, so that makes 7. 3 of Cornelius' representatives, messengers, that makes 10. You've got 10 people traveling north. And do you know what Peter's going to experience the next day when he arrives? I don't think he has a clue. I think he obediently is taking what I just want to call one step at a time. I don't think he has a clue what's going to unfold the next day. As we dig into day 4 in a moment, we're going to find that he doesn't even know why he's there. But he's obediently taking one step at a time. And this, again, I believe is incredibly insightful when God is expanding your heart. Because, my friends, sometimes if we don't know what step 5 or step 6 or step 7 is, we fail to take step 1. And often God's word into our life is this: listen, as I'm expanding your heart, just get moving. Can you follow me in step 1, even if you don't know what step 4 is? You see, this is why we procrastinate, and this is why we often miss out on some of God's most significant movement in our lives. Because as planners, we want to have an entire strategic plan laid out. And sometimes God is whispering, I just need you to get moving. Listen, trust me, one step at a time. And Peter is on this 30-mile journey, and I don't think he knows what's going to unfold the next day. And so this brings us to day 4, the meeting, when he actually arrives at Cornelius' house. Now, Cornelius, Peter may think he's just going to have a one-on-one meeting with this guy. Cornelius has gathered a bunch of friends and a bunch of family members, and Peter walks into a room that is full. I mean, it's like a large gathering. And when I mentioned a moment ago that I don't think Peter knows what to expect when he gets there, I need you to see his opening line. Acts chapter 10, about halfway through the chapter, we read these words. Peter, listen, this is Peter's pickup line. Ready? You are well aware that it is against the law for a Jew to associate or visit a Gentile. This is how he begins the conversation. He walks into the house and goes, you do realize that it is highly frowned upon that I am even here and that we are having this conversation. But then he softens and he follows it with this, but God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. See, Peter's drawing connections and says that thing with the animals, don't call unclean what I am calling clean. He's already making the connection that that's not just about food. It's about people. And so now he asks the question, and his question is basically, what do you want? Why have you called for me? What am I doing here? He doesn't know. He says, so when I was sent for, I came without raising any objection. May I ask why you have sent for me? What do you, is a person here that needs healing, and I need to lay hands on them and pray that God would heal. What do you want? And the next part of the conversation, Cornelius said, I don't know, what are you supposed to tell us? I mean, a couple days ago I had this vision from an angel where God says, I've seen your gifts and I've heard your prayers. Now send for Peter. And so Cornelius would say, so tell us the message that you're supposed to tell us. And it reminds me like a blind date that somebody else set up, but neither Cornelius or Peter knows what the next step is. Peter, what do you want? Cornelius, tell us what you're supposed to tell us. And so Peter begins to tell the story. He says, you know, you've already heard the rumors about this Jesus who came to be the Jewish Messiah. You know that he spent his time going around doing good, healing people and delivering people from spiritual darkness. You've also undoubtedly heard that in Jerusalem he was executed through means of crucifixion, dying on a cross. But he came back to life, and we, his closest disciples, following the resurrection, we saw him, we touched him, we ate with him. Listen to Peter's final line in his message. He refers to the Old Testament prophets, and he said, all the prophets testify about him that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. Note the word everyone. From long ago, the prophets have told that when our Messiah comes, everyone who believes in him has their uncleanness washed away. It's very possible that even as I read those words, you needed to hear them not simply for Cornelius, but for yourself. If you feel unclean and are unclean, and you've recently been confronted by looking in the mirror and recognizing that there are wrongs for which you feel guilt and shame, just hear the words that Cornelius heard. Through the name of Christ and because of his death and resurrection, everyone who believes in him has sins forgiven. My friends, this is the God who makes the unclean clean. He washes clean. I would say Peter has finished his sermon, but he hasn't. He's still talking. But even as he's talking, something strange and unbelievable happens in the room. We read that this is the response. While Peter was still speaking, as the words were still coming out of his mouth, the Holy Spirit came on those who heard the message. It's like, wham! God's Spirit comes and invades the lives of the non-Jewish people listening to him. And remember this posse of 6 that traveled with Peter? They're stunned. They're shocked. The word that is used is astonished that the Spirit of God would come upon Gentile hearers. Check this out. It says the circumcised believers who would come with Peter were, and there's our word there, astonished that the gift of the Holy Spirit had been poured out even on Gentiles, even on those who were un-Jewish, unclean, uncircumcised. God's Spirit descended on him. This is mind-blowing. This is mind-blowing. None of them saw this coming, and God is using this to expand their hearts for what he is about. And so here's the question. This story, who is this for? This series of incidents as they unfold, who is this for? Back to the map that we looked at before, is it for Cornelius up here in Caesarea? Yes, absolutely. This is a story about the conversion of Cornelius. But Peter is asked to make the journey of 30 miles. Some suggest this is also for the conversion of Peter. That is, that God is at work in expanding his heart, enlarging his heart. Yes, it's for Cornelius. It's also for Peter. But remember, Cornelius isn't alone. He's got this group with him, friends, family members who also hear about the crucified, resurrected Jesus. And remember, Peter is not alone. He travels north with 6 people that are now in awe of the movement of the Spirit of God. So it's definitely for Cornelius and his family. It's definitely for Peter and his group. I believe it is also for the heart of Jerusalem. as they have their heart expanded for where this story is going. Because over the 35 years that the book of Acts covers, it will end up here, not simply growing geographically, but growing socially and growing ethnically, where you will have communities of Jesus followers around the Mediterranean coming from radically different backgrounds. Jewish, raised with the Ten Commandments, raised with clean and unclean food, Gentile, eating everything, going to the temple of Zeus and Apollo, and God would be merging these into one family, but first he needs to expand. He needs to expand their hearts. When I ask the question, who is this for? I just want to go, Cornelius up in Caesarea, I'm glad you're included, but this isn't just about you. Peter, you're making this 30-mile journey, but I need you to know something, Peter. This isn't just about you. And this on day 4 is the fourth insight, which I believe is so powerful for us to know, and it's just this. It's not just about me. Can you say those words with me? It's not about me. Ready? It's not about me. Ready? One more time. It's not about me. This is so important because sometimes when God begins to expand our hearts, we go, listen, I want to leverage my gifts and my talents. I want to make a bigger impact with my life. I want to increase my legacy. And there are times when I just want to step back and go, okay, it's not just about me. It's not just about you. It's not just about you. Trust that God may be at work in grandchildren yet unborn. It's not just about me. It might be about my neighborhood. It might be about my office or my job site. It might be about my community. It might be about my city. It might be about my small group. It might be about my church. But just understand something. When I begin to allow God to expand my heart, I am stepping into a stream that is already moving. It's not just about me. And that's what she recalled when she pulled into the parking lot. Her cell phone was busted, and she needed to go by the Verizon store to get things taken care of. And as she pulled in, she looked over, and there was her sister-in-law's car. I mean, there's a lot of other Subarus that color, but the window sticker on the back, it definitely her sister-in-law's car. Well, not her sister-in-law, her ex-sister-in-law. Sister-in-law she hasn't seen since the divorce. I mean, after the divorce, it's not like they attend the same family gatherings and family functions together. And she looks in the window, yeah, and there she is. And she opens the door and she begins to make a 100-foot journey. And she doesn't have a speech memorized. She just knows that she's been thinking about her a lot, that she misses her company, and there she is. She doesn't have a speech memorized. She's just got one word. Hey. Hey. And hey might lead to coffee. And hey might lead to a brief, uncomfortable, and awkward interaction. But God is expanding her heart. And she moves a step at a time, believing that God may already be at work in this relationship. When she awakened that morning, she did not expect that this would happen. As she closes her car door and walks toward the store and walks toward a distant relationship, she just has to say, it's not just about me. See, there are a lot of tragedies in life. One of the biggest tragedies, though, is living with a small heart that remains small when God is attempting to enlarge and expand our hearts for others. And so today, as we talk about the 30-mile journey and return to the journey of 100 feet, my question for you is simply this. What street might God be asking you to cross? What is the 100-foot journey that God might be asking you to take? right now, here and now, this week, can you detect where God might be pleased to expand your heart? And so I offer this simple prayer over you today. May our gracious God be pleased to enlarge your heart. May our Lord enlarge your heart today.